Jinwoo is a weak hunter who is left for dead by his own hunter party. This causes him to gain the unique ability to level up easily as he aims to become the strongest S-rank hunter in the world. A group of low-ranked hunters are faced with huge monsters that seem too high for their ranks. After trying to use magic and their little combat skills, the hunters are still unable to defeat the giant ant monsters. At that moment, the giant monsters begin to attack the hunters, injuring them in the process, until all of a sudden, they are saved by the S-ranked hunters who are referred to as the highest-ranked hunters. The high-ranked hunters begin to fight with the monsters, while the hunter with the healing magic amidst them heals the injured hunters. Soon the high-ranked hunters defeat most of the giant ants, but then they'd all agree that they have not gotten rid of the ants boss. Suddenly, to their surprise, more bigger ants keep showing up. Then the guild master, the leader of the hunters, tells all the hunters to attack the monsters and keep their world safe. Elsewhere, some hunters prepare to go into the dungeon to gain gems that they would sell in order to feed their families. Also, a hunter named Park enters a hunter's guild as he has come to resume work. There he sees his friend Kim, who welcomes him on resuming his job as a hunter. Soon, the young weakling, Jinwoo, who could barely pass for a hunter, enters, and all of the hunters pay homage to him as they all greet him. At that moment, Park asks Kim if Jinwoo is the strongest hunter since he left. To his surprise, Kim replies that Jinwoo is the opposite of a strong hunter, as he is too weak to even overcome challenges based on his rank. He also adds that Jinwoo always ends up in the hospital anytime they go on trips. All of a sudden, Kim tells Park that they have to change the topic before Jinwoo hears them. Unknown to them, Jinwoo hears everything they said, and he tells himself that he doesn't blame them as they are actually saying the truth about him. Soon, Jinwoo meets one of the hunters named Jui, who seems worried that he has gotten injured again, but he tells her not to worry about him. She becomes angry as she asks him for the details of what really happened to him. There he explained that the other hunters he had accompanied to the dungeon were of higher rank than him, which is the reason why they did not hire a healer. Hearing this, Jui becomes more furious, making it look like she is more worried about him than his mother would have been. Jinwoo tells her that he knows it is his fault for being a weak hunter. Suddenly, they are interrupted as all the hunters are being called to enter the dungeon. Soon, a man named Song introduces himself as the one leading the hunters to the dungeon. Eventually, it is time to go, and Jui tells Jinwoo that they have to try their utmost best this time. Before going in, Jinwoo looks at his low-budget knife and consoles himself by saying within him that the knife is better than going into the dungeon without any weapon. Meanwhile, at the headquarters of the guild, the chairman named Mr. Go holds a conversation with his right-hand man, where they discuss the demands of some administration to wants resources that can be collected from the dungeon. During the talk, Mr. Go adds that the stones collected when a monster dies is called an essence stone, which can be used for different purposes. In the dungeon, Jinwoo is able to get a stone from a monster, until all of a sudden, another monster attacks him and breaks his knife. The monster attacks Jinwoo and stabs him in his stomach, which makes Jui scream as she sees that Jinwoo is in trouble. Having seen what happened, one of the hunters helps Jinwoo to defeat the monster, and Jui goes to heal him as she is a healer, which is the main reason she follows the hunters into the dungeon. Angrily, Jui yells at Jinwoo for being too stubborn as she also explains her concern of him getting hurt badly. He apologizes for what happened, but only gets yelled at again as she tells she does not want his apology. Jinwoo becomes more disappointed in himself as he sees that the other hunters had defeated all of the monsters. However, while he is recounting how weak and stupid he is, one of the hunters calls the other hunters to see a new discovery he had found. When the hunters get to where the hunter had called them to, they'd all see a cave that makes them all surprised, as they begin to wonder why there is a cave in the dungeon after thinking that they had defeated the dungeon master. After seeing the mystery cave, Miss Song tells the hunters that they should all wait for the decision of the Hunters Association before doing anything. But the hunters all disagreed as they all tell him that they really want to explore the dungeon. Mrs. Song results in saying that they should all vote, and when the vote becomes indecisive, Jinwoo is told to decide as his vote would be the tiebreaker. After thinking for a while, Jinwoo recounts that he would have to get enough money for his mother's treatments and his sister's tuition fees as his father had gone missing. Eventually, he decides that they should enter the dungeon as he needs money to take care of his family. However, new people with awakened abilities are given their ranks in the Hunters Association, but a man calls the guild master, whom he tells that things are going on smoothly. He also adds that they are unlikely to find a hunter like their top star, Cha Ha-in. At the same time, Hayden saves a girl from some thieves who try to snatch her purse, and because of the help she rendered, some onlookers begin to gather as they notice that she is the one causing her to immediately run off out of shyness. However, the hunters go into the cave and Jinwoo apologizes to Jui, because his decision made them explore the cave in order to find the dungeon master. He also asks Jui if she is fine about his decision, but she angrily yells at him as she reminds him of his near-death experience. She adds that she was barely able to heal his legs and arms, but he had decided to go and die instead. Feeling bad, Jinwoo apologizes again, and she calms down to tell him that he would have to take her out for lunch if he wants her to forgive him. Jinwoo accepts the condition, and they finally get to a huge door which they believe houses the dungeon master. Meanwhile, Mr. Go addresses the newly selected hunters as he briefs them about the portals that the monsters enter the realm with. He also adds that they have to be careful and afraid at the same time in order to be hunters. Elsewhere, the hunters enter a room with huge statues, and when they look around, some of the hunters become disappointed that there are no beasts inside. But when Jinwoo looks up, he sees that there is a huge statue with a crown which is bigger than the rest of the statues. Miss Song sees a magic circle, while another hunter calls him to show him the commandments of the temple. Meanwhile, Jui has become scared and immediately tells Jinwoo that she saw the eyes of the king's statue moving as if it is looking at them, to which he tells her that it is her imagination. At this moment, the hunters become creeped out when the huge door gets shut all of a sudden. Then, one of the hunters yells at the rest as he tells them that he is going home because there is no treasure in the temple. After listening to the hunter talk, the others get the shock of their lives when one of the huge statues at the entrance raises its axe and kills the hunter, and it goes stiff again. Seeing this, the hunters begin to think they are going to fight the statues. Scared, Jinwoo begins to think about his life as the room smells like his death. Then, he immediately looks back as he walks to the front to see if the king's statue would move, only for his life to flash before him as he sees that the biggest statue moves its eyes, just like Judy had said. The statue blasts fire from its eyeballs and Jinwoo yells that the hunters should all bend down. But unfortunately, the statue's laser eyes kill some hunters, while the others who go on their knees are spared. Having seen the gravity of the danger they are in, the hunters begin to scream for help, while Jinwoo finally accepts that they are all going to die. The hunters realize that they are all in deep shit, and they all begin to scream. Realizing their bad situation, Song goes to meet Jinwoo to thank him as he had told them all to bend down before the statue strike. Also, Jinwoo tries to talk to Jui, but notices that she has become traumatized and is on the floor shivering with fear. Song goes to ask Jinwoo what they have to do now, but only for Jinwoo to notice that Mr. Song had lost one of his arms and shows his concern. Miss Song tells him that he can still manage without the arms if he helps him to stop the bleeding, which he accepts to help with. While at it, Miss Song tells him that he would have asked Jui to help him, but she is weak-minded, which is why she can only participate in low-ranked raids despite being a B-ranked healer. Miss Song adds that the commandments of the temple tells them to worship the god, praise the god, and believe in the god. In addition, he mentioned that those who do not follow the rules would not make it out of the temple alive. Hearing this, Jinwoo asks him if the god is the huge statue, as it has started attacking them. At this moment, one of the hunters, who is tired of all that is happening, yells that he had just signed a deal with a huge guild and he has to go home. Then, just as he tries to use his powers to run through the door, the huge statue squashes him like a tiny ant.
Holy Jesus! What is that?
Realizing they can't get out of the place, the remaining hunters become restless until Jinwoo thinks about something and immediately goes to ask Miss Song for the commandments in the temple. He risks his life by testing out his idea, which makes him realize that the statue would not attack if he bows. This realization gives a clear meaning to the first rule that stated that they should worship the god. After they had all bowed to the statue, one of the hunters saw that the statue was not attacking them anymore, but it changed its expression instead. They all rise up and the statue rises as well, but Jinwoo knows for sure that the trouble is not over yet. Suddenly, the statue begins to walk towards them and Jinwoo tells them that the next thing in the commandment is to praise the god. Unfortunately, none of them knows how to praise the god until one of them come out to tell them that he is an expert as he had learned how to worship a god. The hunter kneels before the statue, which holds up a hideous look, and when the hunter begins to pray to the god, the statue steps on him, killing him on the spot. At this point, the hunters know that they are doomed as they all begin to run for their lives. Out of fear, Park suddenly tells the rest that he has to go home as his pregnant wife and young son are waiting for him. However, just as he runs to seek refuge in front of the statue at the door, the statue slices him into two. At this point, Jinwoo realizes that they are meant to praise the god by staying with the statues with musical instruments. Immediately, he yells at the rest to do so and hold Jui as they both run to a statue with musical instruments. But when he sees that nothing is happening, he realizes it may be because there are two people in front of one statue. Then he decides to leave Jui with the statue and run to the statue at the far end of the room. While he runs, he gets attacked by the huge statue of the god, but he eventually makes it to the statue with instruments which begin to sing praises until the huge god statue goes back to sit. Jui goes to meet Jinwoo, who is injured, only for her to get really shocked on seeing that one of his legs is gone as it has been crushed by the huge statue. Immediately, she tries to heal him, but at a point she becomes weak and begins to vomit blood. Because of this, Jinwoo tells her that he is fine as the main thing is for them to leave the deadly temple. The remaining hunters begin to blame Misong for leading them into the death trap, to which he fully accepts as his fault. Jinwoo tells them their problem is not over yet, as it remains one more commandment of the temple. Suddenly, the huge statue raises its hand, and an altar appears in front of it. At this moment, the rest of the hunters think it would be a good idea to offer Mr. Song as a sacrifice, as it was his fault that they were trapped in the temple. Misong decides to be the living sacrifice and moves towards the altar. Just then, he notices that something is happening and asks Jinwoo, who also immediately asks for help so as to get closer to the altar to check. As the two hunters carry Jinwoo to the altar lights up according to the number of people in the circle. Then, Jinwoo asks when the portal would fully open, to which Misong tells him that the portal would open on the 7th day, which happens to be the present day. Jinwoo recounts that they have to leave or else the monsters would keep entering the human realm. To prevent this from happening, Jinwoo tells the rest of the hunters to enter the magic circle, and immediately the door opens. But then the huge statues with weapons begin to move closer to them. Having noticed something, Jinwoo instructs the hunters to fix their gazes on the statues with weapons, and when they do, the statues stop moving. At some point, some of the hunters are unable to fix their gaze on the statues and begin to run out of the door, and each time someone runs out, the door closes slowly. After the hunters had escaped and it remains Jui, Mr. Song, and Jinwoo, Miss Song tells Jui to go with Jinwoo, but she is unable to lift her body as she has exhausted her magical points. Jinwoo suddenly yells at Miss Song to take Jui out of the temple. Then he gives her the essence stone he got earlier just in case he does not make it out of the temple. However, as the two leave, Jinwoo suddenly becomes a hero.
Oh my god! Wow!
And he yells at the statues that he would make sure he kills one of them. A few minutes later, the statues surround him and begin to take life out of him by stabbing him with their huge weapons. At that point, Jinwoo realizes that he had f***ed up and begins to cry as he tells himself that he has been too weak and does not want to die as he also has his family to get back to. Eventually, the statues end up killing him. But before he dies, he thinks about his miserable life and his family. Just at the moment, a strange system appears before him, and before reading what it is, he accepts the contract before dawning. Suddenly, Jinwoo wakes up to find himself in the hospital. He immediately checks his body parts and sees that they are all intact with no traces of him being stabbed. He begins to wonder if he had a scary dream, but his thoughts suddenly get interrupted when two strange men entered his room. One of them introduces himself as Woo, who is the manager of the Hunters Association, but Jinwoo asks him what they want from him. Also, he begins to ask the men how Mr. Song and Jui are, as he had learned that he was unconscious for 3 days. Woo explains that Mr. Song would have to retire as an hunter due to his lost arm, and he also adds that Jui might not be able to continue as an hunter because she is traumatized and is going through psychiatric care. He also tells Jinwoo that when they sent in a group of experts into the cave, they could not find the huge statues the survivors had described, but the only person they found lying unconscious was him. Hearing this, Jinwoo begins to wonder what had happened, but Woo tells him that they think he might have gone through a second awakening. Soon, Jinwoo becomes excited as he is told to place his hand on a manometer to determine the rank he is. As he places his hand on the meter, he becomes so excited at the result, but then Woo tells him that they have been mistaken and leaves. When the two men leave, they discuss that Jinwoo is an ordinary civilian because the manometer displays a 10, whereas E-ranked hunters manage to get through 70. However, Jinwoo is disappointed by what Wu said, and just there, he sees the system bar he had seen before he passed out. Then he wonders why they did not ask him about it, which makes him conclude that he might be the only one seeing it. Suddenly, Jana, his younger sister, enters and begins to yell at him for being so careless and making her worried. She adds that if he gets injured again, she would quit school and get a job, so that he would also quit being a hunter. Realizing how worried she must have been, Jinwoo apologizes and asks her if she can see the system bar in front of him, but she gets angry and asks him what he is talking about. Having noticed he is the only one that can see it, he tells not to worry. Then he proceeds to ask her how to open the notification bar in games, making her think he is teasing her.
Ow! I'm really mad!
She ends up telling him how and leaves for school immediately with her friend, Song-yi, who has been sitting by the door. Soon, Jinwoo begins to wonder what the system bar means and proceeds to check out some messages which he does not understand. He also sees that the system bar says he has to complete a daily strength task, and if he does not complete it, he would be given an appropriate penalty. However, he retires back to his bed as he wonders where he would see the energy to do the given task of doing squats and push-ups. By the way, Wu reports back to the chairman on Jinwoo's test, and the chairman tells him to make sure the hunters are safe. Meanwhile, Cha Hyen, the celebrity hunter, is asked to join the rank B raid as a mentor, but she tries to avoid the responsibility, which makes the man in charge tell her that she just has to act natural, so that the newly recruited hunters would learn from her for the future of their guild. Elsewhere, a huge portal suddenly appears in the middle of the road, and the people who were going about their daily business stop abruptly and watch the portal instead of running for their dear lives. Later that night, while Jinwoo sleeps in the hospital, he suddenly hears a loud noise that makes him fall down. But when he opens his eyes, he finds himself in a desert being chased by a huge monster.
Holy Jesus! What is that?
There he sees the system bar, which shows that he has to survive for 3 hours while running away from the monster. Whereas the nurses in the hospital go to check up on Jinwoo, only to realize he is not in his word. After 3 hours of running for his life, Jinwoo suddenly finds himself in the hospital again, and when the nurses see him, they immediately help him up. After wondering what just happened, Jinwoo realizes that the monster was as a result of the exercise he did not do earlier that day. The following day, Jinwoo begins to follow the instructions of the system bar by working out, and since then, he has been getting rewards like self-recovery and points, which can be placed in any aspect of his ability, such as his strength and agility. The nurses become surprised to see their patient works out every day since he regained his consciousness.
Wait a minute!
Also, Jinwoo begins to get a hang of the system bar and the weird rewards which it possesses, such as badges and keys. Meanwhile, Jui hears that Jinwoo has woken up and decides to go check up on him. At the hospital, she overhears the nurses talking about how Jinwoo has always worked out since he woke up. On hearing this, Jui leaves immediately as she is relieved that he is alright. However, Jinwoo goes to visit his mother in the hospital where he recounts how he was told that she has a rare disease which is caused by the portal gates opened by the monsters. Also, he remembers how he had worked hard in order to get a job, so as to afford his mother's treatments. After remembering what his weakness had made him go through, he decides that he would be putting all of his ability points into his strength in order to get stronger. After thinking about what to do, Jinwoo decides to go into the instant dungeon as said by the system bar. But when he uses the key he got to open a portal, he decides that he would run away if the dungeon gets too dangerous for him. As he enters the dungeon, he suddenly realizes that he is unable to go back, and the system tells him that he has to clear the dungeon before he would be able to go back. He walks into the dungeon and soon begins to get less confident about himself until he is suddenly attacked by some goblins that look like the one that stabbed him during his last raid. He continues to fight the goblins and soon defeats one of them, which gives him more motivation to fight harder and defeat them all. After defeating the goblins, he realizes that he has gotten stronger, but is unaware that he is about to be doomed. A huge wolf suddenly attacks him, and he realizes it is much stronger than the goblins he just killed. He becomes scared as he suddenly notices that his legs are not moving. Due to this, he begins to get flashes of the huge statues that had attacked him from his last raid, which makes him realize that he is traumatized. The wolf manages to scratch Jinwoo in his face, making him begin to wonder how he would go home alive because he knows the wolf is stronger than he is. As the wolf tries to attack him again, he suddenly jumps up and feels that his body is lighter than normal. He decides to fight back by punching the wolf hard in the face. But he tells himself that his attacks are not working on the wolf, and begins to wonder how he would defeat the wolf. Suddenly, he remembers that he has an inventory with weapons in it, and when he calls on the inventory, he draws out a sword which was in time to stab the wolf as it tried to attack him. He defeats the wolf and becomes more confident that he would survive the dungeon. Then he sees that 2 more wolves are coming towards him and ends up killing one of them, while the other runs away. He sits down to rest and also goes over his menu bar, only to see that he has upgraded to level 2. Soon he stands up to go and checks if he would see any essence stone in the wolves he had killed, but instead he gets an item which can be sold. After selling it, he gets 20 golds, which makes him begin to wonder if it would make more money when exchanged. Few minutes later, he suddenly sees that he is surrounded by a lot of wolves and gets his life flashed before his eyes. But then he gets determined and begins to slay the wolves. After defeating the wolves, the system tells him that he has acquired a new title of the Wolf Assassin. He decides to rest for a while when he notices that his sword would not last any longer. He goes ahead to check the system bar and sees that he has gotten more fangs to sell and a traveler's cloak, as well as a teleportation stone. At this moment, Jinwoo begins to contemplate on going back home or staying in the dungeon to get stronger, which at the end he decides to stay in the dungeon. Meanwhile, Jui gets a call from the Hunters Association that they are in need of healers to join the raid at the portal that was opened by the beasts. But when she remembers that Jinwoo is fine, she smiles and thinks about the job as she accepts to go. In the dungeon, Jinwoo keeps going deeper until he eventually gets to where the dungeon master is. The huge snake monster attacks him swiftly, and when he begins to get the beating of his life,
my disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined.
He remembers how other hunters used to mock him for being the weakest of them all, making him to be more determined to defeat the monster and get stronger. He yells that he has leveled up to level 15 and is still weak, but he changes his game plan and defeats the huge snake monster after many failed attempts. After the defeat, he begins to laugh as the system bar shows that he has leveled up. Then he also gains a weapon and a venom fluid. The system also shows that he has defeated the dungeon, and suddenly, everything goes back to the way it was and he walks out of his station. Just then, he is stopped by an officer who tells him that his life is in danger. The officer sees that Jinwoo holds a sword and asks if he is a hunter, to which he replies that he is. The officer tells him that he has to fight a huge monster that is strong for the number of hunters they have. On getting to the scene, Jinwoo sees that the hunters are low-leveled for the kind of monster they are fighting, and he also notices that Jui is among the healers. However, just when she tries to focus, she remembers the huge statues from the other day and becomes weak. Seeing this, Jinwoo realizes she is still traumatized after what they had gone through. Jinwoo decides to help the hunters with his broken sword by using a kind of force to throw the sword at the monster in order to shatter its defense, and when he does this, the hunters are able to defeat the monster. Immediately after this, Jinwoo leaves the scene and one of the hunters begins to wonder what the force was, as they have been trying to defeat the monster since, trying to find out who helped them. The hunter asked the officer who the hunter was, but before they could look for the hunter, Jinwoo had gone, which made the hunter conclude that the strange hunter must be a powerful hunter. However, as Jinwoo walks away, he begins to tell himself that the hunters had weakened the monster before he threw the sword. Meanwhile, Jui sees the sword and realizes it is for her friend. Jinwoo becomes the hot topic in the hospital as the female nurses all drool over his well-shaped and muscular body. They all give opinions about how hot and cute he is. Soon, one of them goes to give him information that he would be discharged that day. On getting there, she becomes struck when she sees how defined his muscles are, and before leaving, she asks if she could get his contact information, and he gives her the one she is to send his test results to when he leaves. On getting home, Jinna notices that her brother has gotten taller and more muscular, and asks him if he has been working out. Jinwoo replies that he has been working out a little, then immediately hands her an umbrella as he tells her to be on her way. Alone, he takes a look at the system bar, and as confused as he is, he decides to keep his abilities on a low as he does not want to attract any form of attention. He also gets a call from the owner of the house that he has to pay his rent, and this makes him immediately go through his phone to check out dungeons he can explore. He sees an offer and decides to set out to look for money. On getting there, the leader of the group introduces himself as Hwang, while one of the hunters there suddenly recognizes Jinwoo as the weakest hunter. Hwang apologizes on behalf of the hunter and tries to explain that the dungeon is a C-rank dungeon which needs more hunters. Then, Jinwoo asks if it would not be a problem for him to join as he is an E-ranked hunter. Jinwoo decides to check the ranks of the hunters and realizes that the dungeon might be dangerous for them. But Wang tells him that they do not need him to fight, because they only need him to help them with their bags which contain food, weapons, and extra clothing. Jinwoo proceeds to ask if they have a healer amongst them, but Wang tells him they do not use a healer. Hearing this makes Jinwoo feel weird about the absence of a healer on the team. Jinwoo signs the contract as he is told that he would be given a lot of money after the raid. Soon, as he carries the bags, a young boy named Yu arrives and introduces himself to Jinwoo, who seems shocked on seeing the kind of amour the boy has on, which could only mean that he is from a rich family. While trying to get his job done, Yu seems to be too talkative and talks too much to Jinwoo. But before they leave, he asks Jinwoo if he is okay with the bags. He also adds that Jinwoo should not be too polite, as he is younger than he is. Yu continues talking, and when he sees that he is talking too much, he apologizes to Jinwoo and tells him that he is not good socially. When they arrive at the entrance of the dungeon, they all notice how big it is but enter there anyway. Jinwoo continues to feel off about the whole raid, but while inside, one of the hunters helps to provide light, and after looking around, the hunters are unable to see everything. Whereas, Jinwoo begins to think about the kind of monsters that are possible to be in such a dungeon. Suddenly, he realizes it and tells the rest of the hunters that they should all watch out for insect-like monsters. And when they begin to hear the sounds of the insects, the hunters all become coordinated as they all wonder where the monsters would attack from. Jinwoo uses his instinct skill to decipher where the monsters would attack, and immediately he gets it. He tells the hunters that the monsters would attack from the hole above them. Suddenly, huge ant-like insects begin to troop from the hole above, just like Jinwoo had predicted. The hunters begin to put their skills into action, while Jinwoo watches them as he is able to tell that they are well coordinated, which can only be because they have been together for a long time. He accesses everyone's skills and concludes that Yu's gear is making up for his lack of skills, but he still gets the feeling that something might go wrong due to the fact that they do not have a healer. The hunters defeat all the insects and Jinwoo also uses his feet to hit one of the ants that tries to attack him. Then, Wang immediately goes to thank Jinwoo for alerting them, and when he asks him how he was able to know when the ants would attack, he replies that it was his instinct. However, while the hunters collect the essence stones from the insects, one of them calls Wang's attention to the fact that there might be a monster more stronger than the insects. Jinwoo hears this and begins to think, until when Yu goes to him to ask if he saw the way he killed the insects, to which he also asks Yu if his gear is expensive, and he replies that his father got it for him because it is his first raid. Jinwoo adds that he does not know why he is having a bad feeling, but he thinks they all need to be careful in the dungeon. Soon, the hunters begin to walk through the dungeon, but all they see are dead insects or injured ones. Yet, Jinwoo keeps feeling bad about the whole thing, but soon, they all get to the dungeon boss chambers and see huge mana crystals that are worth millions. Seeing this, the hunters becomes excited about the crystals that they all agree to share it into 7 parts, which they can do, because the huge dungeon boss spider is asleep. However, Yu feels bad for Jinwoo as his contract states that his reward would not be based on whatever they loot in the dungeon. Then he walks up to Wang and asks if they can split the crystals into 8, which would make Jinwoo get his own share as well, and Wang agrees without arguing. Yu goes to meet Jinwoo to tell him about it, but Jinwoo wonders that his deal with Wang is too good to be true. Just at this moment, Wang asks one of the hunters for a tool which is used to excavate crystals, but the hunter tells Wang that he left the tool outside the dungeon. The team of hunters becomes suspicious as Wang takes them, and tells Yu and Jinwoo that he wants to have a meeting with his team while they grab the tool. At this point, Jinwoo connects the dots and realizes that he and Yu have been scammed as the hunters have used them as bait for the dungeon boss. He remembers the words of Misong, who had told him to be careful of crook hunters that use weak hunters as bait so that they can get all the profit alone. However, Wang tells one of the hunters to seal the dungeon boss chambers while Yu and Jinwoo are inside. Upon realizing what is going on, Yu becomes scared and tells Jinwoo that he would protect him. But Jinwoo decides that he would defeat the monster, just like he had done before, which makes Yu surprised. Outside the dungeon, one of the hunters asks Wang why they didn't kill Jinwoo and Yu in the first place, to which he goes over his plan that the two should be sacrificed to the huge spider, and after devouring them, the spider will go back to sleep and would have the opportunity to sneak back through the hole above the chamber in order to get the mana crystals. After hearing this, the hunters all agree that Wang has a good plan. Wong also adds that the two weak hunters would not be able to stand a chance against the huge spider, and once they go to take the crystals, they would also grab Yu's expensive gears. Meanwhile, inside the dungeon boss chambers, Yu tries to talk Jinwoo out of the idea of fighting the huge spider as he is of low rank. Jinwoo begins to think that he might actually be weak, because the monsters he had defeated before might be lower than the huge spider. After thinking about 1,000 reasons for him to back down, Jinwoo decides to fight the spider as he thinks he is strong enough to stand his ground against the huge monster. Soon, Jinwoo begins to attack the spider and Yu watches in awe, as he wonders how Jinwoo is able to move as fast as that. After many failed attempts to attack the spider, Jinwoo notices that he is getting weak, and as the spider hits him, he falls down hard. But then, he immediately uses his full recovery reward and gets back into action. This time around, he aims for the eyes of the spider and uses his dagger's paralysis and drain effect in it. After stabbing the eyes of the spider severally, it falls down and the system shows Jinwoo that he has defeated the dungeon boss. After seeing all that just happened before his eyes, Yu finds it hard to fathom the fact that Jinwoo is able to defeat the spider. Because of this, he concludes that Jinwoo is a false ranker, as he is able to restrict his stank from going up for anyone else to see. He immediately changes Jinwoo's name to Boss and offers him some water while he begins to excavate the crystals. However, while Jinwoo wonders why Yu is acting weird, he gets interrupted by Wang's voice, and when he checks, he realizes that Wang and the rest of his team had come back for the crystals only for them to be shocked to see that the two had defeated the dungeon boss.
I don't like where this is going.
Elsewhere, Mr. Wu goes to pick up his boss, who is the chairman of the Hunters Association, Mr. Go. While driving him, Wu asked his boss if he could give him a lesson as his schedule is clear for the day. The two go to the training room where Mr. Go tutors Wu, who commends his boss for not losing a step since he left his duty as a hunter. However, at the dungeon, Wang calls on Yu and tells him that he has to kill Jinwoo, as they all thought he had defeated the dungeon boss because of his expensive gear, but Yu chooses to stay with Jinwoo. Just then, Wang and the rest of the hunters try to kill the two weaklings. But as Jinwoo decides to fight back, he gets distracted by the system, which tells him that he has an urgent quest to finish. As a result of his distraction, one of the hunters suddenly attacks him, which makes him fall down on a pile of rocks. While unconscious on the rocks, Jinwoo realizes that the urgent quest is to kill his enemies, and if he does not kill them, his heart would stop, making him decide to do all it takes to survive. As he stands up, everyone in the dungeon becomes surprised, as they had all thought he was dead. He tells them how wicked they have been and begins to kill them without mercy as they attack him. During this, Yu watches as he becomes more scared of Jinwoo. However, after defeating all of the hunters with his swift moves and dagger, he faces Wang, who immediately uses a force field energy, which makes his body as hard as steel. Yet, Jinwoo attacks him by smashing him on the ground, which makes Wang believe that Jinwoo is not a ranky hunter. Knowing his life is about to come to an end, Wang begins to beg Jinwoo to him, but Jinwoo tells him how he had tried to kill him 3 times, and when he tries to fight back, he is here begging for mercy. Without any further, Jinwoo kills Wang, but before he dies, he tells Jinwoo that he should be scared of his brother. Jinwoo ignores this and goes ahead to kill him anyways. Suddenly, the dungeon begins to collapse, and he tells you that they have to go. When they get outside, an officer from the Hunters Association comes to check the dungeon, and when they explain to her that the other hunters had died, she becomes shocked that low-ranked hunters made it out alive. But then, when she sees his gear, she realizes that it is a new, expensive, and popular kind of gear. She immediately concludes that Yu was the one that did all of the work while Jinwoo hid in a corner throughout. After she left, Yu calls on Jinwoo, and he tells him that he had a good raid with him. After the victory of Jinwoo and Yu, who basically did nothing, over their wicked colleagues, Wu is informed about the raid on the C-rank dungeon. He is informed that 6 hunters were killed in action, while only 2 survived. On hearing this news, he is shocked to know that they had not only survived, but had also successfully killed the boss before leaving the dungeon. He finds this unbelievable, since the 2 idiots who have done this are supposedly low-ranked hunters. Because of this, he decides to look into Jinwoo's case, knowing that he had just escaped a raid that killed most of his colleagues as they had tried to see if he had awakened his powers. He finds out that Jinwoo had survived the second raid while high-ranked hunters were reported dead. Later that day, Jinwoo returns home to his sister with enough food and also promises to take care of their mother and other expenses. He had made a lot of money from the raid and from selling the crystals that they obtained. Jenna, who is curious and is aware of his limits, asks him if his colleagues are very strong since he did not return home with any injuries. In response, he merely nods in agreement to avoid any further questions. He is lost in thought for a while and feels guilty for murdering the hunters. This causes him to channel his inner Wolverine as he drowns himself in some alcohol. At this time, his system appeared before him to warn him about his alcohol consumption, but he does not stop and continues to drink more.
Really, nigga?
However, he finds out that nothing is happening because he had received a gift from the dungeon, which is health and longevity. Just as he settles into sleep, his sister comes to inform him about a call from Yu. Immediately, he goes out to see him. There, Yu assures him that he hasn't told anyone about the secret of Jinwoo killing the humans in the dungeon. Furthermore, Yu states that he wants to form a strike team. Hearing this, Jinwoo is instantly uninterested. He stands up to leave, but Yu pleads with him and states his true intention. Apparently, the clueless dummy wants to be a guild master and needs Jinwoo's help for this. Hearing this, he sits back down and listens to Yu talk about how he needs 20 raids to become a guild master for the sake of his father's company. Since they had just completed one earlier, he needs 19 more to become a master, and this is not possible without Jinwoo's support. He further believes his father would buy the story of him succeeding since Jinwoo is only E rank, even though he secretly is as powerful as a B rank hunter. To convince him, Yu offers him 30 billion in return for the favor.
Oh my god! Wow!
Even though this amount was something Jinwoo would jump on someone's back, he thinks this is chicken change compared to what he would be worth after attaining S rank with how much his skill is growing. Considering this, he rejects the offer even after Yu assures him that he would never tell anyone about his secret. This leaves Yu devastated. Later that night, Wang is informed by his secretary about the successful research being made on Jinwoo, his brother's killer. Now he must find him and teach his brother's killer's stupid ass a lesson. He plans to find Jinwoo and Yu as soon as he can. Early the next day, Jinwoo goes jogging with Jenna. While he tries to meet up with his strength goal for the day, he realizes that he can go beyond it. Even though Jenna is no match for him physically, she tries to keep up. Just when she thinks she has finally caught up with him, he decides to go for another round of jogging, which leaves her frustrated. After completing this round of jogging and exercise, Jinwoo realizes that his exercise scores can only stop at double the actual goal. At that moment, he receives the key to a blessed random loot box as a reward for his daily exercise. He also finds out that the key can be used to get into the dungeon castle, where he can obtain the ingredient to the elixir of life, a potion which cures all illness with a powerful magic. On seeing this, the first thing that comes to his mind is how to save his mother. And without a second thought, he opens the gate to the place, but with crazy fear in his heart. As an escape plan, he decides that he would teleport himself with the stone he had obtained from the instance dungeon if things get unbearable. However, he had barely even settled in the dangerous place when a wild three-headed monster attacked him. Seeing he is in danger, he unsheaths his magic sword to cut through the monster, thinking it will tear into pieces, like the other ones he had dealt with in the dungeon. Unfortunately, this does not happen. Instead, it jumps back at him, and without wasting much time, begins to tear him into pieces and ends up cutting one of his hands sharply. This leaves Jinwoo shocked to his bones as he lets out a very loud cry. He hides himself immediately and tries to regain his power, but the beast attacks him again, this time, draining him of both his energy and life. My time has come meme. In no time, Jinwoo could see death approaching him while his system kept warning him. A glimpse of hope comes when he sees a healing potion that would increase his HP. Unfortunately, and even after buying 3 of these, it only increased his HP by 300, which was very low. Scrolling further, he comes upon a poison which could make him last longer in the bed of the battle he faces. After taking the risk, the monster attacks him immediately, and he finds himself trapped in between its jaws. Just then, he seizes the chance and begins to stab the monster in the eyes continuously. Doing this makes the monster angrier, but the pain of the bite gets him more riled up as he stabs the eye more vigorously, leaving the monster for dead. Covered in blood, he is exhausted as he struggles to stand on his feet. For defeating this monster, he receives the formula for the elixir of life. However, he realizes he has to go further into the demon castle to be able to obtain the ingredients for this. Since the monster he had just faced was so powerful, he figures that he would be no match for the monster of the next round if he goes like this. So he decides to return home and come back when he is more powerful to face what is to come. On his return, Jinwoo goes to spend some time with his sick mom at the hospital. As she lays helplessly, He imagines how it would feel to get his hands on the elixir of life. This, he hopes, will cure his mom's eternal sleep disease. Just then, he realizes that he doesn't have the power to get the ingredients and is determined to get more powerful.